We didn't lose Champions League football on Sunday. We lost it at home to Manchester United or Ipswich or Bournemouth or Brighton or any of those other draws. We lost it at Manchester City, conceding a late goal. But it's hard not to feel demoralized by the circumstances on Sunday, knowing that 1 point would have been good enough, and watching a team that once again did not turn up for the big occasion. Presented by 24/7 Services, let's review the monumental, implication-heavy 3 key issues or moments that defined Manchester United 2, Aston Villa 0. Oh, I was so hoping to be in a more jubilant mood here in the parlor, especially today, the occasion of the Holy Trinity Show's 4th anniversary, if you can believe it. I mean, that just seems incredible to me from a time fly standpoint, but also how this crazy little project of mine has allowed me to experience cherished lifelong memories that I wouldn't have made otherwise. And more importantly, friends, incredible people, thousands of miles away. You've accepted me into the Villa family, which is the greatest compliment I could receive. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for watching this channel over the last 4 years. It is remarkable that so much came down to round 38. And if you're leaving it to round 38, it's because you didn't do enough in rounds 1 to 37. Still, Champions League football was in our hands, so were the riches that came along with it and the players that are attracted to it. We could have exorcised some demons at Old Trafford and vanquished some of those last day of the season problems we've had in our history, and instead we're left with the phrase, doing a Villa. And Europa League's a great competition. We should be expected to win it. I just think this club needs to do some serious self-reflection and ask itself, do we want to be a club that goes to Old Trafford or Wembley or Anfield or Manchester City and is passive in its approach? Instead, we're now left with a season of what-ifs. Like, what if we hadn't have gone winless from October 26th through December 4th? Or what if we hadn't conceded late to Bournemouth at home or Manchester City away? What if we'd been drawn against Forest in the FA Cup semi-final instead of Crystal Palace? And what if we hadn't have conceded that 3rd goal in Paris or the 1st goal in the Villa leg? And what if a referee's whistle hadn't blown prematurely? The words of Holy Trinity Show senior correspondent Samir Gaby were echoing in my ears from earlier this season because Samir admitted to me that he was getting frustrated with away trips, especially to the Sky 6 opponents, where a few times this year, games were impacted by refereeing performances, and that issue would rear its head again on Sunday. One big final thanks to Samir, Alex, and Paul White from We Are Villains for all their footage home and away this season. We were statistically battered in this game, which supported what we all felt while watching it. Ollie Watkins' aerial duels was a microcosm of this game itself. We went long, time and time again, because we couldn't manage United's press, and Watkins simply could not hold the ball up, either in the air, on the ground, or with his passing, and that's one reason why the ball just kept coming back to the hosts. And I'm not blaming Ollie Watkins for the loss by any means, but we've seen this movie before. An isolated Watkins, a disconnect between our 3 lines, incorrect spacing, and then just a Villa team that individually and collectively was nowhere near sharp enough. I wasn't surprised by or had a problem with the selection of the team on Sunday, but we know from past experience, this is not a side that is going to go out and be the protagonist. They're going to be pragmatic. They're going to be conservative. And I don't know if Unai Emery will ever change that mentality, but surely if the footballing division is being truly honest with itself, there has to be a question about identity. What does this club want to be? Because I want to see a club that is more precocious, certainly more brave, and has more energy and ambition than going to Old Trafford and inviting problems. I can only imagine how Dave Meller was feeling on Sunday. I met Dave, Sue, and nephew Cameron on last year's trip over, and just recently Dave suffered a heart attack and is now recovering. I wonder if he's under doctor's orders to not watch the Villa. I hope for a speedy recovery, Dave. We need you ready in time for preseason at Hansa Rostock. The 24/7 services crew was also gutted on Sunday, obviously, including Painter Jay, who got this visit from a fan of the Holy Trinity Show. I didn't get a name because it was a surprise photobomb, but thanks for dropping by. Paul Hansaker, the boss, got one of those as well from another friend of this pod. Bless you. And Paul sent me a message after the game on Sunday, beautifully put. When the season comes to an end, there's a sense of sadness. That's how much this club means to him. And he's not going to be able to be with his Holt mates for at least 83 days. And by the way, Paul's team is not showing up to the job site and dropping a stinker like Villa did on Sunday because the demands and expectations of quality are so high. Tysley Train Depot is getting the 24/7 services refresh treatment for their client network rail with a pop of orange to liven things up. And in Litchfield, walls are coming down, space is being opened up, and a custom media unit is being built for a residential client. I'd love to feature your project on this program, no matter how big or small it is. The free fair quote process starts with a visit to the company's website, or just use the numbers in the description of this video. The new Bullring store opened this week. Samir was kind enough to get us some video. It looks really nice in there, and in association with the opening was the launch of next year's away kit, which made its debut on Sunday, of course. Christening your new kit with an absolute shocker is not optimal because I'll now be associating that strip with abject failure and controversy for quite some time, but lots of positive reviews for it and lots of sales too. Big issue number 3. Dismal display. And this could have been number 1 because in the cold light of day, Aston Villa Football Club did not turn up. The amount of chances Manchester United created in that first half was utterly disturbing. We were fortunate not to be in arrears by 2 or 3 goals at halftime. And this is a United team that had a monstrously demoralizing loss in midweek. We had 9 days to prepare. I think Tottenham winning the worst Europa League final in the competition's history to become the worst Premier League team to ever qualify for Champions League complicated things for us on Sunday, because obviously had United won, there was a much better chance they'd mail it in, knowing they have Champions League football next season, alleviating some of the financial issues as well at that club. Instead, now they want to try to end a horrible season on a high note, and right from the kickoff, you could tell they were playing without fear, they were playing free, and they were playing Aston Villa at Old Trafford. 2 losses for the Red Devils in the last 40 fixtures at Old Trafford. That is astounding. And this is where I believe we need some kind of mentality change, because the more we fixate on that fixture and trying to turn that around, the worse it gets. On a positive note, the Europa League is a great competition with some cracking historical teams in it and some really cool away days for the supporters to experience. And if Tottenham Hotspur and Manchester United can reach the final of that competition in the dire state that they are in, benefiting greatly from Champions League teams not dropping into that competition this past season, well then, Aston Villa must surely be favored to finally end the trophy drought and Unai Emery to kiss a fifth one of these. But back to the original point. Yes, there were a couple of circumstances that did not benefit Aston Villa in this game and cost us points. And it doesn't help when every single pundit on television says Villa were robbed. None of that disguises the fact that we laid another egg in an important game away from home. I mean, this year alone, when we needed a big performance at Wembley, at PSG, Anfield, Manchester City, Newcastle, and now Old Trafford, we looked a shadow of the team that plays at Villa Park, and that has never made sense to me. And by the way, I'm not having all this PSR doom and gloom all the time either. That undermines probably the most strategically intelligent group in the entire Premier League that has to punch above its weight because we don't generate the revenue of the Sky Six. And yes, there will have to be compliance by the end of June like there was last year, but has anybody ever considered that PSR is the perfect excuse to move on high-profile, high-salary, older players that are popular with the fans? There's a reason maybe why Unai Emery doesn't get close to his players, because he's ruthless. All that matters is results. Big moment number 2, Emmy's ejection. This could have been the number 1 big issue or moment from this game because it began a chain of events that we really could have done without. Well, actually, it was Matt Cash's back pass that began that chain of events, and I knew the second that it left his foot, catastrophe was imminent one way or another. It was as if it was happening in slow motion, and thus the Cash must leave narrative was fueled even further, and you do wonder whether the club will finally look at right back this offseason and say, we need to upgrade this position because it's integral to how we function. What happened after the short back pass will be debated in Birmingham area pubs for generations. Should Emiliano Martinez have taken a less aggressive approach and simply allowed Rasmus Højlund to break in? I mean, the poor kid's been in some kind of a drought. He hasn't scored at Old Trafford since early December. Maybe Martinez makes a save or a block. Maybe Højlund misses. And you know what? Maybe even Højlund scores. But Martinez takes the riskiest option. And just before halftime, when we would have been thrilled with the scoreline, it's now suddenly 11 versus 10. The idea that might have been Emi Martinez's last contribution in a Villa shirt is terribly sad given his stature and his legacy with us. I mean, first he helped us get into Champions League, which was a personal goal of his, to now having one rash moment heavily contribute to perhaps us not getting into Champions League next year, and Robin Olsen, who we know is leaving for sure, having to come in his place. I mean, it's all so incredible. But that moment almost kind of epitomized Dibu's season with us this year. A couple of really important saves in the early part of that first half, but then a regrettable and probably avoidable incident that had implications. Martinez has an aura about him, and I think that's helped him in games in the past, and I sometimes wonder if that's an affront to something else, given how emotional he was last weekend. I mean, he's going to be a club legend with us, partially because of his ability, his personality, and just what he's accomplished while at Villa Park. But if that was to be his final act, I think that would hurt him deeply, and I think he'd want his legacy to be more positive. In fact, if his future isn't already determined, I could see how he would want to come back just to rectify that, but something tells me in the tea leaves that the decision has already been made one way or another, and there is no room for sentimentality in the cutthroat world of football. And the number 1 big moment that defined United 2 Villa 0, Rodgers robbed. And it is the number 1 moment because, yes, Villa were dire in this game. But when this incredible, folkloric moment, especially for Magpies fans, occurred, the score was 0-0. And somehow Aston Villa was in a Champions League place thanks to Everton and Chelsea. And in minute 74, despite being completely anonymous again for the majority of the game, Morgan Rogers provided one of those incredible moments of magic. When the referee assignments were made public prior to the weekend, I did find it odd that a guy I didn't even recognize would be put in charge of such a big game with Champions League implications. I mean, the site I used said that Thomas Bramall only had 30 Premier League games under his belt. And this was the main point in Aston Villa's complaint to PGMOL, which they filed virtually right after the game. And I realize when every single team in the league is playing at the same time on the same day, an already weak refereeing pool would be stretched to the limit. But nobody could have predicted the type of controversy that Thomas Bramall would be embroiled in given the financial stakes of this game. Assistant referees are reminded all the time, keep your flag down if you think it's close, and VAR will bail you out. Don't commit if it's close, and it's no different for referees. But the first mistake that Thomas Bramall makes is his positioning, and I'd be shocked if this wasn't brought up in his debrief, and there will be a debrief. You can bet on that. But judging from this, it looks like he's 25 yards away from the incident. That's too far, in my opinion. And the next mistake he makes is that he just assumed it was going to be a routine backheader to the goalkeeper. Referees can never assume. They always must expect something weird to happen. So the referee is essentially guessing from 25 yards away. And credit to Morgan Rogers, who somehow keeps this ball alive and moving without ever even touching the goalkeeper. But the second that referee whistle sounds, that's it. Play is dead, ball in goal or not. VAR has nothing to do with this. The only thing they're checking is that the whistle did sound before the ball entered the goal. And I know everybody at Stockley Park was silently begging that the P in the whistle broke at that moment so it made no sound, because they would have wanted to have spared Thomas Bramall of his blushes while also being keenly aware of the optics and the implications of that moment. Afterwards, Unai Emery, who waited to confront the referee as he was coming off the field, claimed that the young official admitted it was a mistake. So now Howard Webb has to defend a multi-million-dollar mistake, and some other club is going to benefit from a referee just giving himself that out by delaying the whistle. That'll benefit some other team now. And the fact that something so egregious, with the stakes being so high, could happen at Old Trafford is not quelling any of the corruption or conspiracy shouts by our beleaguered fans. Let's suppose the whistle didn't sound and the goal stood. I mean, there's no guarantee we would have hung on for either the win or the draw, but Villa would have bunkered in and they would have dug in as well. And in the end, a draw would have been enough. And instead, what happens? United score to take the lead just 2 minutes later. Of course they did, heaping more misery on the aura of this fixture at that stadium in that city. A United side that lost half of its home games this year, its worst Premier League season in history. They are a mess financially, and we couldn't take advantage of any of that. And yet, somehow, the Red Devils will find a way of dropping 60 million plus on Matheus Cunha. I will say it again, if there was ever a time for the Premier League to grow a spine and punish Manchester City or Chelsea for their creative accounting, this would be it. And I realize that punishments would probably be applied to future seasons. And by the way, that is not how any club wants to qualify for anything. But this still feels to me now like it's a matter of one side being far more willing to throw money at lawyers than the other. This is it, the final numbers for the season. Some of these may be slightly off because there is subjectivity in VAR decisions and even set-piece goals. But looking at this, the road record was a problem, especially against the better teams. 7 draws at home didn't help either. Never mind Sunday, though. Without question, the biggest reason we didn't finish higher this season was this number right here. Conceding that many goals in the final 15 minutes, and even after 90. Man City away, Bournemouth at home, PSG away in Champions League. This stat was the difference between Europa and Champions League, and maybe even a higher table position. And this stat comes down to mentality. The The Sill Hill Brewery star performer goes to the Aston Villa traveling support. Player ratings were abysmal all across the board. There was not one player that deserves the recognition. So I'm giving it to those folks who show up in Manchester time and time again, hoping for a great performance and a victory, only to come home disappointed and empty-handed again. Mad respect to you, and I'm toasting you with Sill Hill Brewery's special offering this month, Stargazer. Now, there is some massive news out of the Sill Hill camp. They've just completed the asset acquisition of, ironically, Trinity Brew Company in Litchfield, which they're now going to renovate and rebrand to Brew City Litchfield, where a lot of Villa fans live. Outdoor space, stage for concerts, brand new bar, screens everywhere. Congratulations to the Sill Hill crew for pulling this one off, but also congratulations for turning an empty industrial space in Aston into a thriving and buzzing pre- and post-game pints option. And long may that continue. Up next, Hansa Rostock on July 19th. I wonder if Max Hegemöse will start in goal for them on that day. Obviously, I'm not going to preview that now, and I think between now and then is going to be very busy for this club. In fact, my spidey senses are sensing that we're going to have some announcements in the month of June, either confirmed transfers or heavy speculation, because that just seems to be the norm right now prior to the window actually opening. And obviously, we're going to have a pretty big name joining us in the front office. That news feels imminent. I personally love the coming weeks, because this is where we reshape, redefine, and reimagine Aston Villa Football Club. I mean, the ambition hasn't changed from the top. I just hope that what happened on Sunday doesn't somehow impair our ability to entice the types of players we need to bring in to keep our progression going. We need to upgrade this squad. Out with the old, in with the young. I'll have something special for you in the next few days here. But until then, let's try to forget what happened on Sunday and not dwell on that, and instead embrace this process that we are now entering into, the reshaping of Aston Villa. And of course, and as always, up the mighty Villa!